How do you two go about differentiating constructive criticism from negative feedback?
I believe that not all feedback is yours to take. And now as an adult and just being super in tune with what is for me and what is not, whenever I hear feedback, I really immediately I know if it's true or not. And whether I admit it in the moment or not is up for discussion.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Videocraft show presented by Video Husky. As always, I am your host, Jon Santiago. And in case you're new around here, it is my job to talk to content creators about their stories, strategies, and experiences of building an online audience through video. And this week's episode is part one of a two-part episode of the Videocraft show presented by Video Husky. Our guest is Lindsey Simcik, co-founder and co-host of Almost 30, a top 50 podcast with more than 30 million downloads since its inception in 2016. Now, Almost 30 is a must-listen for anyone looking to hear heart-centered conversations about mental health, modern spirituality, entrepreneurship, and more. Almost 30 has also developed into a diverse brand and business, connecting its thriving community through digital events, digital courses, and a variety of other programs. Now, before Almost 30, Lindsey began her career as an actress and singer on the East Coast. And while building the podcast on the side, she also worked as a fit model and senior instructor at SoulCycle. In this episode, I chat with Lindsey about the inner workings of Almost 30. And among the topics we discuss include how she's learned to process and take feedback about her work from the show's audience, why they've decided to lean more into creating video content in the last year, and what that production process looks like in terms of creating videos, and the importance of leaning into your imperfections as a content creator, and much more. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Videocraft show presented by Video Husky. I want to remind all of you too, if you yourself are looking for video editing, then look no further than Video Husky. We get your edits done first draft delivered to you in 1 to 2 business days. You can reach us at videohusky.com to learn more. Take our client fit quiz to find out if we could be a great fit for you. Let's go ahead and now toss it to my conversation with Lindsey Simcik of Almost 30. Lindsey Simcik, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Videocraft show presented by Video Husky. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you on because for everybody who is listening, I've actually reached out to Lindsey and Krista, who will be on another episode of the Videocraft show sporadically throughout the years, just as a fan of their show. And I think I remember the first time I reached out to you two ladies was I think I mentioned in my email, yeah, I'm probably not your target demo. I'm like a, late 20s, early 30s Asian American man listening to your show. But I love the stuff that you talk about. And, it's an honor to have you on this show.
Oh, Jonathan, thank you so much. It's actually funny. I would argue that it would be amazing if we had more of your demo, the male demo, almost 30, past 30, because the truth is, and I feel like I've found this out in having more one-on-one conversations with men, my partner being one of them, that, these conversations, the more intimate, the more deep and spiritual, are not necessarily being had in a group of guys, or in your place of work or anything like that. So, and if it is, then I think that's really amazing and you're lucky. And I think women have kind of this built-in support system to talk about those deep things. So yes. The fact that, you are resonating with some of the content just makes me really, really happy because that's secretly my hope too. Yeah,
I think it's very important for us as men actually to kind of step out of our zone because typically, there are a lot of things associated with being a man and not necessarily showing your feelings or showing your vulnerabilities is one of them. But you were starting to see that shift. I think that there are, and you probably recognize this too with the male guests that you've had on your show, there are quite a few people who are kind of leading the charge on that front. I mean, I'm a big admirer of of Tim Ferriss. And I think that he has, taken steps in that direction to be somebody who is quite honest about his dealings with his emotions and his feelings and whatnot. And it's cool. I mean, for me too, I also tell people, I'm like, look, if you are a single guy and you want to understand women, you need to listen to women. You need to listen to the conversations that they're having so that you can become better at being a better man for them, for lack of better terms.
I completely agree. And I wonder what that is. I'd be curious to ask you maybe what's in the past held you back from kind of having or listening to these different and more conscious and self-development skewed conversations. Because for me, these conversations have brought me closer and closer to myself, and which in turn has just helped me to be a better leader, a better partner, a better co-founder, a better sister, a better daughter. I'm a huge proponent of just kind of like delayering the onion that is you. And it doesn't have to be any certain way, and it doesn't have to happen in a certain timing. But I do think that the awareness and the effort is just so rewarded in every aspect of your life. If you are not looking at aspects of you that could be basically running the show without you knowing, it could be a really frustrating existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think coming from like the traditional male perspective, there is this pressure to be right and to have the answers. Otherwise, if you don't have the answers, it's frowned upon typically. And I think, again, this is changing now, where more men, and not just men, but also women too, and all people in general, are now starting to become more comfortable with the idea. I know personally for myself, I just try to be more comfortable with the idea of admitting that I don't know everything. And I think that changes, and especially, obviously like your show with Krista started, with this idea of you two talking about the idea of transitioning from your 20s into your 30s. And I don't know about you, but for me, as I've gotten into my 30s, I'm, actually going to be turning 35 in a month, amazingly. I have gotten to a point where, the ideas and perceptions that I had about what my 30s would be like, I kind of thought, oh, by the time you're 30, you're going to have everything figured out. You're going to know so much. You're going to be wise. And actually, I don't know that much. Like, I know more, but I realize too that there is so much that I don't know, and that I have so much more to learn. And I think that's important. I think that's very important, an important idea to embrace, not only as like a person, but also just even as creators too. This being a creator yourself, this is new uncharted territory. And so being able to embrace the unknown and kind of like weave through it is very important as we move forward.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Especially as creators. And we all are creators, in one way or another. And I just have realized that the more questions I ask of myself, and the more that I live those questions, my creativity just shows itself in other ways that I couldn't have expected. And yeah, that's been kind of like that unexpected gift of doing some of the harder work, is opening up and feeling and being more creative.
Yeah. I wonder too, with doing almost 30 now, for what has it been? Almost 6 years now at this point?
Yeah, it was officially 5 in September, but we've been recording for about 6 years.
Yeah. So in that process of creation and building this show, how much of this has been a process of you kind of figuring things out in real time and essentially like documenting it through the process of creating content?
Yeah, I mean, everything really has been figured out in real time, especially everything that we've done for the first time. Krista and I think our partnership our friendship, our business relationship has really allowed us to take those risks and to do things that we've never done before, do things that we don't necessarily know how to do. But because we can lean on one another, we can pull together our own geniuses, but then our resources. We have been able to do things that we never thought we could do. One of those things stands out to me, and that is tour. So we toured the world in 2018 into 19. And no one told us to go on tour necessarily. I think our audience was excited to meet us. We were incredibly excited to meet our audience. And we hadn't really seen anyone go on tour. We had seen some of the male-hosted podcasts go on tour in some capacity, but not in the way that we wanted to do it. We wanted to bring our podcast experience in real life. So that might include a meditation or a sound bath or an experiential part of the live experience, an interview, intimate time with Krista and myself. So we really wanted it to feel like a full 360 experience of Almost 30. You know, we didn't know how we were going to pay for it. We didn't know how we were going to schedule it and manage it, but we did. And we went everywhere from Sydney, Australia to London to Miami to San Francisco, all over the United States. And it was a lot of work, but it was one of the most profound experiences. One, because we really worked that muscle of doing things that we had never done before and built that trust in ourselves and in one another that we can always show up and do the best that we can and make something happen. We learned that it's not going to be perfect. We definitely had some hiccups along the way, but we realized that our intention for going on tour was so clear. It was to connect intimately with our audience, to grow the reach of Almost 30 so that these conversations, these really conscious, beautiful conversations could be heard and had all over the world. And I think because that intention was so clear, things really fell into place for us. For example, we partnered with WeWork, who was around at the time, and we would partner with them and use their space to have like smaller town shows, and it would be more intimate but beautiful, and we would bring in local eateries and local practitioners to come and share their gifts with our audience as well. So it was a super collaboration that turned out to be something that like Krista and I think about often as like, wow, we did that. I don't know if we'll ever be able to do that again, just in the world that we're living in. But man, we did that, and we're so proud, and it gave us a lot of confidence for everything that we've produced since.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that you two get to do that again. I'd love to attend one of those. Actually, it'd be cool to kind of connect with the community. And I know that community is such a big thing for you two in terms of fostering that. And it's like, that's one thing that I think we're starting to see that develop more in all of these creator businesses that are being built, is a focus on community. But I just find it so interesting when there are creators like you two who are really thinking consciously about how to bridge the gap between online connection and offline connection. Cause I think that's where a lot of the problems that we have right now are in terms of people having discussions and tweeting back and forth at each other online, but not being able to see each other face to face. You know, we can do Zoom calls, which is, somewhat better than going back and forth on text, but having these opportunities, I think it's just very incredible what you two were able to do to kind of, foster that and push that forward in terms of building like a face-to-face type of interaction with your community.
Yeah, because I don't know how often that happens with creators who are either podcasters or video creators. We live or in front of the camera or, behind the mic. And I don't think it's for everyone. I don't think everyone should do it. But I do think it's something that creators can think about, because I was even voice noting some of our community last night in Instagram DMs and just giving like a little hello and responding to them with a voice note. And that's definitely not scalable, but it's something that we like to do every once in a while, because connecting and making people feel seen and heard in a genuine way. And yeah, just bringing out the best in them just creates this very electric, strong connection with your community. And I promise you, they will be lifers. They will be fans forever. They will support you when you put out your new book or your product or your new video, what have you. Like, they will remember that moment that you're like, hey, Jonathan, what's going on? I'm so grateful that you are a part of our community. And I just want to tell you that, it's like people remember that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, again, like going back to, I emailed you two a couple of years ago, I think it was 2018. And, I have no expectation of like, they're going to respond back to me or whatnot. They're very busy. They have a big platform and whatnot. And so for you two to even reply back, it means a lot it meant a lot to me. And I'm sure, when you doing something like that, sending out voice notes to people, that's very interesting to, again, it's like you said, it's not scalable, but, when you think about building that intimate connection or fostering that intimate connection with somebody who is in your audience, that person, like you said, can be an ambassador for you for life. I mean, I'm sure those people who have received those DMs from you are like, telling 10 people about Almost, and then those 10 people are telling to another 10 people. And it's like exponentially just exploding from there.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happens. I mean, I consider our growth incredibly organic. I don't know if we had like one big pop, but I do think it's because of that, because of just our ability to be as present as possible with people that we talk to, meet, connect with online. Because at the end of the day, like, this is who we're making this content for and this podcast for. I want to talk to them. I want to get to know them. I want to know, what do you need? What are your questions? And how can we support you where you are right now?
Is this something that you have always done since the beginning of the show? Just trying to connect and reach out directly to people who listen to the podcast?
Yeah, in different ways. Early on, we did like little local events. And so that was our way of being able to connect with people who listen to the show, have just started listening to the show in person. So for example, at the time I was still teaching SoulCycle. I was working a full-time job and doing the podcast. So was Krista. I was like, why don't we do a SoulCycle ride and have it be Almost 30 themed and any of our listeners can come and ride. We sold it out, had a full room. And that was one of our first, tastes of like, oh my gosh, like, and hearing from people like, this episode really, really touched me because, and just getting information that really influenced what we do. And I don't know if creators are doing that as much as they could be. And I do think there is a delicate balance because I'm a creator in other ways too. And sometimes I don't want feedback during the creative process, right? Like sometimes it can get in our heads, but I think with this piece where we're putting out episodes every single week and we clearly feel the community building, to ignore them just didn't make sense to us, So I feel super, super grateful that people were willing to connect and come to our events because that just began it. And then in our DMs and in our comments, we're answering every single one, not necessarily with a voice note, sometimes with a voice note, but we're answering every single one. We really appreciate when people take the time to send us a message. And so that is something that we do. And we always recommend podcasters and anyone really with a platform do.
You mentioned something there that would kind of pique my curiosity. And that's the idea of feedback. How do you two go about differentiating constructive criticism from negative feedback?
Yeah, it's, for me, it's a feeling. It's a feeling and it's a practice because when I was younger, I feel like I would get a piece of feedback in whatever I was doing. I don't know, say like playing tennis or as a student or whatever. And I would just feel like, oh, I have to take this. And this is what they're saying is absolutely true. And I must take it as Bible and I must fix this, which, most of the time it helped me. And then I believe that not all feedback is yours to take. And now as an adult and just being super in tune with what is for me and what is not, whenever I hear feedback, I really immediately I know if it's true or not. And whether I admit it in the moment or not is up for discussion, but you know when it's true. It's not always easy to take, especially if it's more negative skewed or critical skewed, but you know when something's true if you are super in tune with who you are. And so for me, my tactic in the moment is to slip into a neutral seat. So I'm almost like feeling energetically like I'm sitting back, and say like my partner gives me feedback, which is like a very intimate thing where like you get feedback from your partner. It's like, oof, but they're with you all the time, you know, and you're in an intimate relationship. So there will be those times. And usually as humans, we will emotionally react.
Right.
Be like, we'll either get upset, or we will deny it or become defensive. And so I try to energetically sit back a little bit, not in like a give up energy, but it's just like, let me listen. And then I take as much time as I need when I get feedback. I will breathe. I'll just be like listening, you know. Oftentimes if it's one-on-one, I'll repeat. I'll say, so what I'm hearing you say is that when I do this, it makes you feel like this. Or when I have this particular tone, it makes you feel anxious or stressed. And then the person will say, yes, that's what I'm saying. Or no, let me clarify. And then I'll say, and this is kind of like the Imago technique, but I kind of like shift it for some feedback. And then I'll affirm that feeling that they're having. Yeah, I can imagine that. Like when I am in a bad mood, it makes you feel really anxious, and I can definitely understand that and have compassion for that. And sometimes I'll even just be like, I'm sorry for that. And then just go into a mode of explaining my experience of, you know, when I am in a mood, sometimes I'm not aware, or when I'm in a mood, I just want to remind you that it's never about you unless I tell you it's about you.
Right.
And what I would love to work on is just having open communication during those times so that you don't take on my mood, you know. So we go on, but it's really this ability to listen, to be open to feedback, to recognize when it's true, to recognize when it's not true. And then from there, have a really honest conversation without getting defensive. Because I feel like if feedback is well-intended, you can have a conversation. If feedback is just to be an asshole and like put you down, I don't believe you need to have a conversation. And I think you can just leave it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just very powerful to kind of sit with it when it comes initially, to kind of let it process, because the initial reaction, like I'm sure if you get a negative response to an episode that you two do, of course, emotionally, your natural inclination is to be offended or hurt by that. Yes. But at the same time, you know, you might be blinded from the possibility that, wait, actually, hold on, this is constructive criticism that's coming my way. I just need to pause for a moment and kind of pay attention to let my emotions subside a little bit, and then I can kind of process this a little bit better. Does that sound like something that is kind of like accurate there?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. How do you take feedback?
That's what I do. Personally, I just try to sit with it. And the thing is for me is that I know myself well enough now to where I will initially be hurt by it. We had an episode, one of our most recent episodes on the podcast with a YouTuber, Bernadette Banner. It's blown up because her audience is crazy. I mean, it's the most views that we've got it on YouTube, downloads that we've gotten so far. Wow. And there's so many people commenting on the episode. I mean, we've gotten, at this point, by the time this episode comes out, I don't know how many thousands of views it'll have, but right now it's around like 20,000 views on YouTube in the last 2 days. And it's crazy because like I'll look through all of the comments and most of them have been very positive. You know, it's great when people are saying, hey, we love Bernadette, but you are actually a good interviewer too. You ask good questions. That makes me feel good. But I also know that there are going to be times where somebody will jump in. It takes just one, right? One person to say, I don't like the way you ask questions. and me, maybe 10 years ago, you know, in my early 20s, mid 20s would feel, like just despondent to that. Like, I just got to go retreat in my space and I feel like crap and I'm not feeling good. But at the same time, it's now I just try to take it all in stride, both the positive and the negative feedback, because I don't want to get too big of a head, you know, based on like how many people are saying, hey, you're good at this, or we enjoyed this episode, because then you don't want to rest on your laurels, right? You don't want to rest on like just thinking, hey, everything is good, and that there isn't any room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like, I feel like internet comments are always a whole other bag of worms.
Yes.
If that's the proper term. Because they don't know you very well. You don't know them very well. So the feedback only goes so far. It's the feedback to me when there are comments on the internet, which is good and not so good, is just how you made them feel. And it's through the filter of how they feel about themselves. Does that make sense?
Yes. It's like their perception of their world, of their reality kind of, you know, creates this idea of who you are, of how they're perceiving your communication to them.
Yes. Yeah. And so I take it with a grain of salt sometimes. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes, you know, I gotta take a beat, but it's the internet.
Yes.
And I know people have a lot of time sometimes and say mean things. And then if it were in person, they wouldn't say it, you know? So we just gotta be discerning.
Yeah. And I imagine too, that has just been something that you've developed that over time, especially in these, you know, last several years of developing and growing this audience of almost 30, because that is something I think that it can be difficult, you know, initially, right? When you're getting all of this attention, because I actually read an interview that you did not too long ago where you mentioned that you consider yourself more of an extroverted introvert, correct?
Correct.
And so there are moments, I can relate to that too, where there are moments where like, hey, I can turn it on. Like in this conversation, I can turn it on one-on-one. You know, we can have a fun conversation, things like that. I can get in front of a crowd from time to time, but I get drained after a while, you know, and I need my space to recharge from that. And I imagine, and I wonder if that is something that you've learned to deal with yourself, being a public facing figure and having, you know, doing your events, going out in person and interacting with the community, because as much as you enjoy the chance to connect with the community that you've built at almost 30, you still need your private time and your personal time to yourself. Yes.
Yeah. I'm definitely an extroverted introvert. I think I have to be extroverted for what we do. And I have my waves of extrovertedness. Like I had one this past week, actually. I'm feeling very social. I want to be around people. I'm super motivated to just, be out there and be with people. So I know myself in that I get energy from being on my own, being by myself. So you know, oftentimes on like a Saturday, sometimes I'll like take 4 or 5 hours and just be with me. I'll go on errands. I will get my nails done. I'll read. I'll go to the park. I'll lay in the sun a little bit. And I have a partner, you know, and he's the same way. And he's like, yeah. And when we come back together, I mean, new people, it's the best because like he's had his time. I've had my time. But just on the public piece, the fact that like we're a very public brand and we share so much on the show, it's been a learning curve. You know, I think we shared much more we shared much more period in the beginning, and it was done so in a way that was a little more crass and not as thoughtful. Now we've kind of polished that and made sure that whatever we do share, it's intentional. But I definitely in the last like year or so have just felt this need to not share every single thing. Yeah. Because if I'm processing something on the podcast that I haven't like talked to my partner about or worked out yet within myself, it's really not fair for me to share. It's really not fair for me to give that to the public to then, have an opinion themselves, especially if there's someone else involved, because they don't get to share their quote side or their experience more so. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think it's a bad thing for people to share everything online. I think, there is such a beauty in that, to give people permission to feel like, oh, I can talk about that, or wow, there's someone else out there going through what I'm going through. And I feel like that's such a beautiful part of what we do. But for my own sanity and health, I'm just not sharing everything. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I'm like, I have that urge to just like hop on Instagram and say something or whatever. And not that I'm like suppressing it. It's just like, wait, Linz, like, can you be with yourself for this moment to like process something or just like think about something rather than making it content?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that is very fascinating to me when I interview creators like yourself, especially ones who have built such a large platform, is figuring out what it is that you should share and shouldn't share with the audience. Because I think in the beginning, right, you mentioned that, when you and Krista started the podcast, it was a bit more crass, but I imagine that came from a place of, well, probably no one's going to listen to this, right? Like it's just us like sharing our thoughts and we're putting it out there to the world. But how many people are actually going to listen to this? And then once you build that audience, I imagine there is a sense of like responsibility that comes with the influence that you have acquired as you've grown your audience. And so you become more conscious of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there definitely is a responsibility. And we hope to inspire people to take responsibility for themselves as well. Mm-hmm. So I think we have a responsibility when we show up to be as present, as intentional as possible, to share from our hearts, empower people to ask real questions and ask important questions. And I also believe in the self-responsibility piece. For example, if someone doesn't like a piece of content that we create, or an episode, or something a guest said, or maybe something that we said, we always take that feedback as like, is that true? And does it warrant an apology or anything like that? So that's number one. And if it doesn't, and it's, just something that hits someone a different and kind of bad way in their experience, my hope is that people, when they're on the internet, especially, or listening to podcasts, that they can take responsibility for their experience and say, you know what? I disagree with that. Yeah. And you know what? This is really bringing up something within me that feels a little funky and something I haven't felt in a long time. And I would love to like explore this more, rather than projecting onto the creator.
Right.
And this is very general. So there's nuance to this and it could be different, but saying like, I hate this episode. I hate this person. I hate, it's like, why is this coming up for you? And I just think that's so much more powerful, know?
Yeah. For sure. It definitely is. It definitely is. Lindsey, I want to, move in the direction too, since we're kind of moving in that way anyways, and of talking about your creation process for the podcast. Mm-hmm. In particular, when it comes to preparation for the conversations that you're having, what does that look like for you and Krista?
Yeah. I mean, every guest that we have an interest in what they do, who they are, their story, because we've either experienced what they do, or we've read their book, or we've been fans of theirs or watching them, or we've heard about them. And we are careful not to do too much research. Because sometimes I feel like if you do, at least for us, if we do too much research, then the questions become very like directive in where we specifically want to go. So if we know that something happened back in 1993 with their business partner and whatever, and we ask a question to try to get there, it's fine, right? It's of course fine. But I feel like we have mastered a way of asking questions and being present and having conversations, actual conversations back and forth that allow the guest to open up in a way that they probably haven't on a podcast before, and allows the conversation to go where it needs to go. So oftentimes we'll finish an interview and we're like, whoa, we didn't expect to go there.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad we did. And thank you for going there. Yeah, that's something that Krista and I have practiced. I think just like naturally it's become something that we're really good at, and we have each other. So it's kind of a nice little, triangle of energy where like, we can play off of each other, and we could also just have a conversation with this person rather than question, answer. It's kind of nice to like go in between the lines and like really feel into the energy that they're giving when they're telling a story, and also notice what's coming up with us, like when they tell that story, and reflecting that back to them. And because oftentimes what we're experiencing might be what someone out there listening is experiencing. So if we don't kind of bring that flavor into it, it doesn't become as dimensional as we want it to be.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just a lot of relying on intuition and active listening and your curiosity for the other person and the other individual. It's like, I'm sure you've been on other podcasts or talked to people who they're going down their list of questions. And I know from listening to you two, you probably have some things that you have in mind, but it's probably like me. I have a list of questions here and I'm like, oh, we're going in a different direction right now. This is okay. Let's roll with that. And I think that's where the best, as far as like podcast conversations, that's where the best content really comes from, is like from the unexpected.
Totally. And you're so good at that. I can feel that even just talking to you today. It's like you understand the importance of that type of container for someone to feel really comfortable.
Yeah. It takes time to learn. I have a background in journalism. And so I actually did another podcast like 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy to say that I was doing a podcast like 10 years ago before, considering where things are today. Kind of makes me feel like, dang, I wish I could have kept that up, considering where you and Krista are. But at the same time, it's definitely, I definitely credit traveling for me and just having conversations and exercising my curiosity as a way to really like hone that ability for myself. And so, have you always been somebody that has been naturally curious, like from a young age?
Yeah, I think so. As a kid, my mom took so many home videos, so I can see myself as every age if I want to, because she has so many videos of us growing up. And it's actually really cool because you forget, or at least I forget, just how wild and curious and funny and just imaginative I was. Yeah, I always had a curiosity, but it kind of was like, I don't know if I was asking a million questions. I don't think I was that girl. So at times, well, let me just say that my curiosity came out in like my exploration of my little world. So I would go in the backyard and I would get curious about like, I wonder what is like under that huge rock. Like, I wonder if I can find new bugs and discover, whatever. So like, I was like actively curious. And then, when we started the podcast, it wasn't natural for me. I would get a little nervous. I was used to reading someone else's scripts because I come from like that acting background and musical background. And so like, I don't know, it felt awkward to me. It felt like I wasn't good at it. So I still have those moments sometimes where I'm like, geez, Linz, like get with it. And to have someone like Krista, who is, I feel like so curious in that way, and it has always been, it's super natural to her. So yeah, there was a time in which I kind of felt a little bit like not as good, and that comparison thing comes in. And when that comes in, it's just, it's really difficult. It's difficult to get out of that loop, but thankfully I did with some therapy and coaching and all that stuff. And I really honor like what I bring as an interviewer. You know, it's not going to be what Krista brings. And that's the beauty of our show, that we're so different. But yeah, I've always been curious. And I think the show has like just ignited something within me where I'm like, oh, I can be like really curious in little moments. When I go to get my coffee, I can get curious with the person who's beautifully making my coffee and get to know them and all of that.
Yeah. And I mean, it'd be cool too, to just kind of imagine like, where will I be if we keep doing this show for like another 10, 20, 30 years? Like it's like working out, you know, it's a skill that you develop over time. Cause I know for me personally, I was probably similar to you in that I wasn't always asking questions when I was younger. I was always afraid to ask questions just because you don't want to look like an idiot, you know, because I think you kind of associate, at least for me, I probably associated asking questions with the idea of, oh, he's not smart enough or he's not intelligent enough. That's why he's asking questions. He doesn't know this obvious thing. But there's a lot of power now that I realize, and I'm sure you recognize this too, again, in just being able to embrace not knowing everything.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. It's like a nice little relief. Like, oh, man, I don't have to know everything. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah, it relieves a lot of unnecessary pressure and stress on yourself to realize that, hey, we're all just figuring this out as we go.
Always.
Lindsey, I also want to talk to you about, in regards to the creation process for you, you two have been leaning in more into video. It seems like over the last year or so. I don't know if was that like a kind of like a pandemic pivot for you two to feel like, maybe we have some more space here to try and like turn the podcast more into video and have more content up that's visual for our audience to consume.
Yeah. I think we started doing video more consistently. Yeah. Basically in the beginning of 2020, I think. And for us, it was something that just felt important to a certain extent that we have video content to share, not only on YouTube, but on social media to kind of tease our episodes and also to put our faces out there a little bit more. I think Almost 30 is an entity in itself. And so, yeah, I'm hesitating because I'm like, video is not easy. Video is not, it's something that we wanted to try. We've done consistently. We'll continue to do, I think. But it creates a whole other layer of work that, it's just a lot. And like we have to, not that we always do, but we do get ready now that we're on video. And before we would just kind of show up as we were. Yeah. And I think it's been beneficial because a lot of people watch the show on YouTube, which is nice. Not, not more than they do on audio, but it's nice for people to just like put it on their TV or on their computer and actually see us. I think there have been some times like where we're so glad because we captured like a really funny moment that was like, not words, but it was like our reactions. And it was just so funny and so good. And yeah, it's been fun. And it's allowed us to create some fun, like reels and IGTVs and stuff as well. Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunity for you two to actually go out and repurpose content into multiple platforms. Yes. I'm really curious about some of those challenges that you kind of teased as far as like, diving into it. One of the things that, interested me in what you were saying there was just having to get ready and get prepared. And this is something, it's so interesting to me as a man, as a guy, because I've had this dialogue with other women creators who've come on the show. And there is this, there is a different level of expectation when it comes to appearance between men and women. Like I can go, I worked out this morning. I took a shower. I threw on some pomade, threw on my contact lenses, brushed my hair. I'm good to go. I don't have to do makeup or anything like that. But for you two, it's like, there's a whole other element that like,
me as a guy, I don't have to deal with that, in terms of appearance.
Totally. I mean, I don't have to show up with makeup on, right? And sometimes I don't. It's like, it just depends. But every once in a while, because I work from home, so I'm really not wearing makeup a lot at all. So, when I get the chance to, it kind of is fun and I treat it as such. It's not always such a task. But yeah, I think you're bringing up a great point that Krista and I sometimes talk about with video and YouTube and the difference between feedback and comments for men on video than women on video. I feel like in general, people are more critical of women on video. That's just my opinion and my observation. I don't know if that's true.
I would say that actually from my conversations with female creators that is the case. And I wonder too, if it's like for you, if it's similar in the sense where they're commenting on things that don't even have to do with the content of what you're talking about. It's never like questioning your intelligence or your knowledge on the subject that is featured in the clip, but more or less like, why don't you smile more? Or why aren't you wearing makeup, or why'd you wear that dress or something like that? I don't know.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, it is what it is. I don't know if that's going to change. I hope it does. But overall, we don't get many of those comments whatsoever. We are getting lovely comments about the episode itself, the guests, the content, how it's impacted them. So I really cannot complain. I think my complaints come with the extra work. I really respect people who are doing video content every single day, shooting, vlogging, doing their podcast on video. Like, it takes work, the editing process, syncing, like, it's just no joke. And sometimes I don't want to do it. Yeah. That's just the truth.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. I mean, and even with this show, like, I couldn't do this by myself in terms of shooting, the shooting element I can do, but then the editing that we do on this show, it's not possible video wise without my producer, Nikki, and our editor, Ingrid. They're amazing at what they do. So what does do you have a team then, I imagine, that you are working with to help you produce video? Do you work with freelancers, or are they in-house now? What does that look like?
Yeah, everyone's a contractor. So we have Tommy Kramer, who's in LA. He's a Kramer Creative, and he is our in-person videographer as well as editor for certain reels and IGTVs. He does some of our programs, and he's fantastic. I think what we love so much, and this is great for anyone that's looking for someone, he's been with us for quite some time, and he just gets the brand. He gets the voice, he gets the style. Like, he just gets it. And I think it's really important to clearly communicate with a potential videographer editor, like, who you are, who your brand is, what's important, what's the feeling, what are the textures and colors, and just vibe. Get examples, get a Pinterest board going of video examples that like remind you of your brand, like as much information as possible, so that the editing process moving forward can be like really, really swift. We also have Sarah on our team, Sarah Nell. She actually just got a full-time job with a HBO show, so she's going to be leading us. But she has been incredible helping with YouTube, editing, and as well as reels and some IGTV. So she's been fantastic. And we found Sarah through our intern program. So we have a handful of interns every season, I suppose, and they help with our copywriting team. They help with social, or in this case, she'll help with editing. So it's been fantastic. And those two have really they've really picked up on who we are, and they also inspire us to evolve.
What would you say have been like your biggest learnings over the last year when it comes to creating video for yourself? Some of the things that you now know, having dived into this more consciously, more intentionally, obviously creating more content over the last year. What are some of the things that you have learned that you didn't know going into this?
Yeah, I mean, so much, so much. I think preparation is key. And what I mean by that is not only, preparing for an interview with knowing who we're interviewing and all of the logistical stuff, but it's more so knowing what I need as an individual before I do anything related to the podcast, before I record, before I sit down to do any video for anything. It's like checking in with myself. How am I feeling? What do I need? Do I need more water, more food, or whatever? Like we go on the physical level and then we go to the emotional level of, do you need a moment to just like ground and get in your body? Do you want to take a moment and set your intention? Do you need any support right now? Would it help to have a conversation with Krista right now about what we're about to do and just kind of shake out any nerves or talk out anything that feels confusing? So, again, it comes back to that self-responsibility. And I've learned that like slowing down in those moments enough to know, okay, this is what I need in order to show up as the best Lindsey possible for the thing that we're about to do. I've also learned that perfection in this medium, especially podcasting, you can strive for it, but I don't know if that's what people want, So yeah, I've just learned to have a little bit of grace when things don't go exactly as planned, or the audio has a glitch, or the video doesn't record, or whatever. Like, things happen, and I just trust that whatever happens that is unplanned will teach us for the next time. It's like I'm always like very, very, very in tune with like, ooh, this is a lesson. This is a lesson. Like, we better take note. And I think that shift in mindset to be like, okay, this is a cool lesson. Great. Awesome. Like, we don't have to learn this again. Like, we know now is a great place to be in, rather than, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, this would happen, and just really feeling the weight of it, rather than being like, how can I transmute this? Like, okay, this is happening for me, and in what way? What can I learn? Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like to me, really just being more proactive, I guess, and just really, like you said, taking more responsibility and, understanding that things aren't going to go right, but then where can you make lemonade out of lemons, right? Like, I don't know if that's the right expression there, but just, take with what you've been given. If there's a mistake or something with the way the video has turned out on a podcast or anything like that, and just do what you can with it, because it's really, it's really fascinating to me and interesting to me what you pointed out there about like people aren't looking for perfection. And that's something that resonates with me, because it is something that I think people like your audience, they don't want that. Like, if they wanted perfection, they would watch Netflix, they would watch HBO Max, they'd watch, all these, big traditional media outlets rather than you. People are looking for, it might sound cliche, but they're looking for authenticity, right?
Yeah. Yes, 100%. I think that's another thing we learned. Yeah. Just that authentic piece of like being ourselves and trusting that is enough sometimes. And it's been so liberating. I'm sure you felt that as well. It's like, it's why I love what we do, because I don't have to not be myself ever.
Yeah, for sure. So as we kind of get close to the end of this conversation, Lindsey, a couple more things I want to talk to you about, especially here on this content creation front, is like the platforms that you're choosing, right? Like, obviously you have podcasts, you're doing YouTube, but Instagram for you two is really the main place, it seems, where you have most interaction and engagement with your fan base, with your audience. How are you keeping up with all of the changes that that kind of come with the platform, especially over the last year, right? With the introduction of Instagram Reels and whatnot. How do you kind of keep your head afloat with all the changes that happen there with that?
Yeah, I think, Instagram's a tool. It's a beautiful tool to connect with our audience and to express ourselves and to repurpose our podcast content. And, I think it can get frustrating at times when the algorithm changes and you're like, what is happening with our views and our numbers and our this? And then I have to remind myself, like, okay, why are we here?
Yeah.
I mean, why are we here? Like, Am I here to be checking the numbers every single day and obsessing over all of that? No, like I'm here to create, to be myself, to make people laugh, to inspire people. And so, our thing is let us be as consistent as possible, intentional as possible, and as forward thinking as possible with our content. We've done some things via reels that no one's ever done before, or have like kind of repurposed a take on a cool idea. And we're always willing to try things. And I think that's what is really fun. Some of them hit, some of them don't. And we try to follow what does hit and give the audience more of what they find really inspiring and fun and engaging. But I try not to let Instagram, the ever-changing Instagram, like run our lives. It's like, it's a beautiful tool and I will use it and I will leverage it to connect with real people.
Yeah, it's important to remember that it is a tool that you use and not a tool that uses you. Yes. Right. Like that's something that I think a lot of people, we have trouble doing that these days in our social media, interconnected world that we live in. So the last question that I have for you, Lindsey, as we wrap things up here is just in terms of the future of where you want to be headed and where you want to go with Almost 30 moving ahead in the coming years and whatnot. Like what is the vision that you and Krista have? And in particular for yourself, I'm curious because I'll ask the same question to Krista when I speak to her.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we are eyes open, hearts open, ears open as to like what the next best thing is for us. And, we have a beautiful membership that we're pouring into every day that I love so much. And I think that's a place where we are growing more and more over time. And it's a place where people feel so seen and heard and held through their evolution. We have such a good time in there. And so I just want to continue pouring into that. And I think pushing the envelope with the podcast, having conversations that people didn't think we were going to have, or just being really brave in that way. We're living in a really interesting time. So yeah, I just want to make sure people feel supported, heard, and like they can be themselves. And so those envelope pushing conversations sometimes activate things within people that are like, oh my gosh, yes, I can say something. I can be myself. And so we'll continue to do that. And then personally, Krista and I are definitely pursuing like things that we're interested in outside of the podcast, which is normal and so fun. I have my music. And so I am recording an album, recording songs over the next year or so. So I'll be sharing that for sure. I have like just really cool collaborations kind of coming into my sphere where I'm like, oh, wow, this feels so right. And this feels so easy in a way, it just flows. So I'm excited to share the music. And yeah, life is good. Life is unknown. We kind of like to leave a bit to the unknown because she'll show us, Almost 30 will show us like the next thing. Yeah,
for sure. They couldn't have said it any better. A great way to end this conversation with you, Lindsey. So, Lindsey, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, where everybody can find you, Almost 30. Look them up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. You can also find them on Instagram and elsewhere. So many different platforms. YouTube. We'll have links in the show notes for this particular episode. So, thank you so much for joining me, Lindsey.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate you having me.
Once again, thank you to Lindsey Simcik of Almost 30 for joining me on this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. If you want to find out more about Lindsey and Almost 30, make sure to check the show notes for this episode at www.videocraftshow.com. Also, want to ask a little favor for y'all. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube. If you are watching on our YouTube channel, hit the like button as well if you enjoyed this episode. And if you would like to get the audio version or you are listening to this on your phone or anything like that, feel free to subscribe to the podcast over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And feel free to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you get your podcasts too. We always like to hear from you. Gotta always thank my producer, Nikki Vicente, and my editor, Ingrid Saraiba, for helping me produce this show. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. And also got to thank Paulo Lopez for all the work that he does on graphics too. If you want your videos to be edited to look just like this, then visit videohusky.com to learn more. We will see you again on another episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky.